Hello everyone. Thank you for joining our digital web clinic. This month we're going to be talking about trends in digital media measurement. Let's wait one more minute for other people to join. All right. Hi everyone. My name is Rick Rude. I will be moderating today's discussion. With me I have Domenico Tassone, Executive Vice President of Encima's Digital Solutions Practice. He has spent over 20 years in a variety of digital marketing leadership roles. In addition to working with us here at Encima, Domenico is also a chief collaborator for the View-Through Measurement Consortium and serves as a strategic advisor to Signal Tag Management. Once again, thank you to everyone who has taken time out of their busy schedules to join today's discussion, where Domenico is going to talk with us about digital media trends. During the course of the web clinic today, please feel free to submit your questions via the chat window. We have made the chat window private so that you can feel comfortable asking any questions that you may have. We're going to try to get to all of your questions at the end of the web clinic. But just in case we run out of time, we can send you a follow-up response via email with more information. Your questions are valuable to us. And with that, I now pass it on to Domenico.
Thanks, Rick, and hi, everyone. This is a good opportunity to give you a little background. We're essentially helping clients every day figure out how to make the most of their digital marketing strategy. That's what we mean by digital solutions, and this presentation, go to the next one, will give us a little bit of a chance to talk about what we're seeing across clients and some of the top, more complicated issues that our clients and others are struggling with often. What are the top trends impacting measurement? That's kind of the focus I'm going to take at looking at digital marketing and what we mean by digital solutions. So we do tend to bring a measurement bias to how we look at all of the trends and technologies that are out there now. This first slide is just maybe obvious for many people, but it's worth mentioning, and the reason is that it's getting worse. Just beyond anecdotally, there's more and more digital channels that digital marketers and all marketers really are able to play with or leverage for their marketing strategies. One of the biggest points of this slide really is about mobile, and by mobile that can mean really platforms like smartphones as well as tablets. There have been some studies or analysis out there lately that tablets are getting a bit squeezed in this, where smartphones are getting bigger and more powerful and laptops are getting smaller and more flexible, let's say, as the form factor. Regardless of that, you definitely are seeing a lot more media targeted to people by their platform, definitely mobile advertising, whether it's display media or paid search or text kinds of advertising or new formats, really taken off, and there's just a lot of choices out there for you as a digital marketer. On the flip side of that, that means that your target, let's say consumers or professionals, they are definitely inundated with more and more messages. So that does present some challenges from a measurement standpoint, but getting people's attention is definitely part of the challenge nowadays. What has arisen out of this is the increase in the quantity of vehicles out there with marketing messages increasing so much has led to some folks on the, let's say, more advanced side of this to leverage technology to limit or gate the kind of messaging they're getting or the quantity of messaging they're getting. So you have the advent of ad blockers in the last few years, which are an annoyance for advertisers for sure. They're definitely problematic for publishers. There are some interesting studies out there that show the biases coming in more tech-savvy, male, better educated, higher income audience that are using these tools. Suffice to say, there are some workarounds, and we've actually been successful in helping our clients measure how much ad blocking is going on within their audiences. So this is a popular slide. You've probably seen this one. The point really is that there is a lot of chaos out there in terms of measurement. There are different technologies and different vendors and different sides of the marketing and media equation that offer up these measurements, and some are better than others, and there's just a lot of variance in terms of the quality and usefulness. You might call it the fidelity or the data integrity behind all of these technologies. definitely is not to be taken lightly. Some things work better than others, and there's clearly more technology coming, and so this is a turbulent area of the industry. And last number I found was there are 2,000 platforms out there in terms of analytics and measurement. So this is definitely a big challenge, just keeping track of all of them and using the right ones at the right time. Also, I'll just add that there are some standards here and there, but it's more likely that there's not going to be standards for everything all the time. So you're going to have to, as a digital marketer, develop some policies or discipline within your organization and your vendor network to deal with all of this. So hunker down is basically the message of this one. It's going to be a chaotic ride in terms of data sources and measurement techniques.
Domenico, how do you even choose? I mean, where do you start here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where do you start? It is, in my experience, I usually work with clients and recommend as much as possible to employ pilot tests, piloting strategies.
Okay.
You really don't know what you're getting into when you're dealing with the sales teams from various vendors. The sky's always blue, and that's kind of what their job is. However, you really don't know how it's going to work until you get the tool in place and get all the tracking set up, which may be more complex than it looks. You might need to integrate pieces of it with various parts of your digital stack. So we recommend getting your feet wet, and better vendors should allow you to do some kind of a pilot test without having to jump in bed for 12 months or a couple of years,
Okay.
software service license.
That makes sense. Thank you. This
is a trend that's been going on for some time. I've done some, tweaking of this. Basically, what you may have seen, this is McKinsey & Company popularized this view. This slide really just shows that we're no longer in the world of AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action, which many of us in marketing land have been trained on as the funnel. So the funnel is more this recursive loop of status. Where are you in this loop in terms of your customers, and where are they in turn? It's not necessarily as simple as it's demonstrated here, but you have some elements still of AIDA. When you start off at, let's say on the left there, number one, the initial consideration set for whatever clients might be purchasing. They are influenced immediately from that point by social media these days. I mean, we're talking Facebook, Twitter, on the business side, more of LinkedIn, Pinterest, so on. These are all ways that people are being influenced by each other. And this really wasn't accounted for. And nowadays, it's possible to account for it. It's possible to quantify it to some extent. Maybe not as much as we would like on the measurement side of the world, but it's there, it's a factor, and it permeates all the steps of the former funnel, even into the post-purchase experience, which, it's all about loyalty, right? But you're also dealing with a layer of social influence, or social influence, really, that after someone purchases the product or service, some are going to announce it, some are not, but everyone's looking at what everyone else has bought, and there's a lot of transparency on this now, and there are some out there that can game this a little bit, but ultimately all of this ties together in a new way that's complex, to say the least. Another big trend or critical area to look at this year would be your programmatic strategy, and programmatic has a couple of different sort of dimensions to understand it. So this little diagram here gives you some of the pieces from a technical standpoint, how these tools come together, and really about the ad targeting side of it, which is a big piece of it. But there's more to it. When you're looking at the channels that can be leveraged for with a programmatic strategy, it is historically been dominated by display media advertising. However, that same technology or same infrastructure can also be used for owned websites where It could be content management systems that you're manipulating or influencing with your programmatic data. It could be partner sites where you may have the ability to manipulate content that's served up dynamically. Basically, a lot of this uses the same, pipes, if you will, to decide what should be served up at any given time. It doesn't have to be an ad; it could be content as well. Similarly, email is also part of this, where you can make this two-way. Information that's coming in from your site experience, for example, through a data management platforms and content management systems, that can be used to influence email triggering. So it's not just a one-way street. I guess is really my point there with the channels. In terms of sources, people have seen this before, I'm sure, but the risk of being redundant. When we talk first party, we mean your data as the client. That could be your CRM data that's siloed behind closed walls. That could be your site behavior, which is often a little more accessible, but it's your data. That's what they mean by first party. Second party could be partners that you're working with, suppliers or downstream partners. Third party could be the database company data is available and for rent, let's say. So that's could be Blue Kai, Datalogics, Axiom, and so on. These are companies that make their money licensing that third-party data to you in various ways of targeting. So it could be based on literal attributes like demographic data, or it could be used and manipulated to do modeling, algorithmic modeling. So it could be some lookalike method or a discriminant analysis-based method. A lot of the techniques used in database marketing lend themselves nicely there. CRM coming to display targeting, yes, that's definitely possible now. There are some players doing it. It is a little more complex to pull off, and you do need to have the right tools in place, but for sure it's not just contextual targeting based on someone's affinity for a particular website based on panel data. So I'll move on to the next section there. It's a little bit more on display media. It doesn't mean that your ad targeting is divorced from media context, kind of what I was getting at a moment ago. You don't have to target people, sports enthusiasts on ESPN, assuming that they're all sports enthusiasts. You can target people that fit in some other targeting criteria.
Or maybe sports enthusiasts that are looking at BMWs, for instance, if they can figure that out with the DMP data.
Exactly. Or have been on your site before or within a certain time period.
So essentially we're not limited to focusing on a sports site to target sports enthusiasts, because we can figure out what other sites sports enthusiasts also look at. Right.
It really opens up the people into the more multidimensional consumers that they actually are. Demassification of ad networks, really a lot of what ad networks used to do has been unbundled, and you can see some of the pieces there shown in this IAB diagram. So that's a lot of tools and creating a lot of data and a lot of potential for optimization in ways that were never before possible. So that's a big deal for us and for our clients. Media buying itself has evolved. So people have heard of trading desks. Well, trading desks are a hybrid team really that combines some of the past expertise that you might have seen with display media and the various ways of targeting with more of a paid search bidding approach. So won't get into all that, but let's just say that it's definitely evolving, and agencies and the industry are evolving to keep up with that technology. So that's really the gist of this slide. There's a lot going on when it comes to programmatic. You definitely want to think about how you can leverage that.
Who sets all this stuff up, Dominic? Does a different team set up each component, or is one organization come in and set up the whole thing? How does this get turned on? It seems pretty complicated.
Well, good question there. In the days of old, an ad network kind of hid all of these functions behind, a simple, one invoice, let's say, and maybe multiple behavioral targeting types. And these days you are basically leveraging potentially your agency and their team, which may aggregate or bring together some of those other services, such as the trading desk to actually manage on a day-to-day basis, the tool, the DSP tool that will actually do the buying, demand-side platform, which allows you to access the inventory on an ad exchange in real time. Some of the other tools really are never really going to get that close to an advertiser because they're more publisher-centric tools, but suffice to say that they are being used by the publishers similarly.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, offline, it's complicated. Definitely, it's complicated and getting more complicated. You know, this is covering a couple different areas, really. What I wanted to say on this slide was really, when you think about online, offline, you know, customers are experiencing your media in multiple places, multiple devices, and they're oftentimes, you know, transacting in the retail environment. And some platforms are allowing, some of these larger players, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, are allowing a 360 view of their customers, which in some cases allow for transacting, you know, in a digital environment on a mobile phone, let's say. It all comes together really with these larger players being able to authenticate people across devices. And retailers have some ability to do this themselves, and we usually encourage the clients to have their own control over this stack in the long term. And, you know, in terms of pilot testing things, you can get a lot of experience and knowledge transfer about what are all these tools, how do they work together, how to leverage them, how to measure, and you know, rather than creating a dependency, if you will, on some of these larger concerns that are very sophisticated about data and the online-offline piece, you don't always get as much control or exclusive control over the data when you're leveraging these bigger players out there. And they really are creating their own sort of universal cross-channel, cross-device IDs where, I mean, think about Facebook, for example. People are authenticating on multiple devices. That's really hard to do for most clients, you know, unless they're retailers and they have a strong e-commerce and mobile presence. Even in store, you've got to have some way of individualizing people, and if you don't have that, it's something you might plan to do, and in the meantime you might leverage these tools to get closer to that information. Taking that a step further, the idea of this golden rule, this new golden rule, he who has the data makes the rules, or whoever has the data makes the rules, really, it's really about measurement, but it's also about targetable data. So your data is important. Your data is your customers and prospective customers' experience. So the people surfing around on your website are giving you signals of what their interests are, and that's not to be taken lightly and not to be shared too much, because that data could be used against you. It could be used better by others potentially who are more comfortable or have the engineering resources and data mining ability to leverage that data. So you want to be careful who that data gets shared with is really the message of this one.
I agree. Data is very valuable, and oftentimes people are very anxious just to give it away.
Yes, definitely. And this is kind of a dual mode of thinking slide. So on the one side is really the consumer privacy aspect of all this, and the other side is really about really taking that slide before a step further, data primacy or data stewardship, data ownership on the client side. On the consumer side, you know, there is a small but loud and technically sophisticated minority that want to gate or limit the amount of data shared. And for most customers, most consumers, I think they're open to some kind of a trade-off where there's a convenience or value provided in exchange for that data sharing. But others are just, you know, definitely opposed to that. And so knowing your customers and what their sentiment is about this is definitely important. Some audiences are going to be more sensitive and some less so. You just have to know your audience, I guess, without getting into too much detail about it. Just for example, if your audience is /dot, you know, it's a highly technical audience, they may not be as open to, you know, really aggressive advertising types. It just may be a turnoff for them, versus something a little more mainstream like a newspaper site, I don't know, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, something like that, the audiences are different. One's going to be a little bit less, let's say, resistant to targeting. Moving on, the network advertising initiative, I think it's a great idea, but it's had some good progress in making more transparent what's going on. But I'll just say that this has some technical limitations. Cookies and machine IDs. For example, with the network advertising initiative, you basically have an opt-out cookie, which is fine as long as you're on that machine and device. But if you delete that cookie, you end up getting targeted by all the advertising again. So there are emerging ways of dealing with this. I don't think they're completely solved yet, but it's something to watch closely for because it's going to affect how well you do your targeting and how well you can measure. At a high level, there's a lot of fraud going on, and I've broken it into a few buckets, if you will. Just anecdotally, the other day I had a charge on my credit card that was fraudulent and no idea was with a particular office supplies vendor and hadn't shopped there in a while, and we happened to notice there was something there and thought, wow, who bought something? Well, it turns out nobody. So, for sure e-commerce fraud's a big deal. I don't think that's going to go away. There's all kinds of crafty people out there trying to get credit card numbers, but particularly for digital marketers, there's a few other types worth mentioning. Ad delivery, non-human traffic is a problem at times. There's some sketchy ad networks, video in particular, that tend to want to start ads without human intervention, which typically is not a best practice and may foul up your measurement if you're not aware of it. Clicking clickbots, that's definitely a problem. I think there's a lot of that going on in mobile, and there's some research out there about that. Behavioral profile spoofing, this is a newer one, and I ran across publisher content system hacking. There's just all kinds of ways that ad deliveries are getting thwarted or manipulated. So it's an ongoing problem. I think it's going to be something you just have to be aware of and bake it into your strategy or measurement planning, etc. I'm going to skip browser and search, but affiliate fraud definitely is an oldie but a goodie. Manipulation of cookies in terms of cookie bombing and stuffing campaigns or browsers really with cookies. It has a perverse effect on view-through measurement, which is a favorite subject, but you can defeat it using good incrementality analysis. I'll say that. And affiliates marketing tends not to use that as much as display advertising, channel to channel, but it is something you can look into. So this is kind of a key slide. I saved it for last. Process is not necessarily as fun or sexy as some of the tools and tech that's out there today. However, we emphasize process at Encima quite a bit, and in our team, digital team, we definitely take it very seriously in terms of analytics enablement. So without drilling into all of this, suffice to say that we think that all clients need to be mindful of this and encourage or leverage it whenever they can tap into it across their vendors. For example, pilot testing, that's a process. You want to get that in place before you can really understand how to use a tool. This process represented here is just one of the ones we use for analytics optimization. But everything that you're touching when it comes to your digital stack invariably is going to require some process. It takes time to learn these tools. It takes time to understand how they fit in, how to operationalize them across highly cross-functional teams. We deal with it all the time, and most of the time you see things choke or fail, it's because of bad process.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dominic. This concludes the main portion of our discussion, but we definitely want to answer any questions that you may have at this time, so please feel free to enter your questions via the chat window now. And as a reminder, the chat window has been made private, so no one else can see your questions. Please feel comfortable asking any questions that come to mind. We will try to answer them through our remaining time, and while we're waiting for you to enter your chat questions in the window, we're going to take a brief moment to talk about the Encima Group. So the Encima Group is a business analytics company, and we are focused on our clients' need to achieve three things: better data, better insights, and better results. Better data comes through the implementation of the right technology and better processes, as Dominic just mentioned briefly, and a focused management approach. Those better insights come from that better enablement of the data, and the insights focus on actionable recommendations that help our clients provide a deep understanding of their customers. These understandings lead to better results and better optimizations, which ultimately affects your bottom line. It's essentially 3 tiers of service offerings at the Encima group. We have an analytics insights group that provides consulting, advanced analytics, big data management dashboards services. We have a digital solutions team that provides site analytics and tag management services, in addition to a paid media tracking request process. And thirdly, our last team is the marketing automation team. This is a marketing automation platform, Encima CX, that delivers a best-in-class platform that delivers the deep marketing expertise across every channel, in addition to a managed service approach across the multi-channel world. All right, so I do see a couple questions coming in, Dominic. Let me see how much time we have left. We'll make sure we can get to some of these. Okay, so we have about 4 minutes left. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly for you. First question I see is, can you provide more details around what you mean by advertising clutter? Do you think it's getting better with targeted advertising?
Yes. Well, no, actually. Advertising clutter is getting worse, and it's not just the quantity of messaging that's out there. Despite the fact that everyone's got more targeting available to them, that does not mean that targeting is working, and it does not mean that targeting is correct. So what we have is a lot of bad targeting out there, and I'm sure, anecdotally, everyone's had this experience being targeted with very wrong messaging. Occasionally you'll see those retargeting ads that make sense, and sometimes they just don't make sense. Maybe you've already made a purchase. Well, that means you weren't put in the exclude pool. Maybe you should have been sold or presented with a different message. Maybe you shouldn't have been targeted at all by that particular vendor for some time. So there's a lot of examples of demographic targeting being off. There's a lot of example of behavioral targeting being off, and again, it gets into somewhat the device issue. Which device are you on? So it's definitely a quantity issue, that there's a lot more of it, but it's also a quality issue in that targeting is something you have to take seriously. If you're going to do it, have a plan, have a process, pilot test it and make your mistakes early, fail fast, make corrections and adjust it and get better at it. Benchmark it and test it. You really have to test things out in this way. Otherwise, you could be spending a lot of money on the latest bright, shiny object and maybe doing more harm than good.
Okay, thank you. This next question, we have about a minute left, is in line with the previous question, so I'll ask this. I have heard about 360-degree targeting. What does this mean and how do I measure it?
Yeah, 360 means you are able to target on multiple devices and multiple channels is usually what people mean by that. It's a challenging to do online in general across channels, let alone across devices. With some of the media vendors out there, they are getting closer to this 360 concept where you're able to target across devices better than before. Definitely not perfect yet, but when you've got people who are authenticated on a mobile device, a tablet, on a laptop or desktop, there are ways of stitching all that together so that you can understand where this particular customer is from a platform standpoint, present them with messaging that is consistent and mindful of where they may be at in the purchase process.
Excellent.
So it's difficult to pull off, but it is happening every day. People are getting better and better at it.
Okay, thank you. We are technically out of time, but this last question is pretty interesting, so I'm going to ask it. What are some steps that I could take as a marketer to ensure that my data is not being leaked?
Yeah, data leakage is a big problem. So we encourage clients to have written policies, work with their agency partners, work with their internal IT teams and other vendors like Encima does with our clients to have written processes and standards and make sure that whatever tags are being placed on your website are vetted properly, tested, and don't just show up there kind of left to chance. What happens, sometimes, I mean, I've had it happen to me personally where I've had, tags from several agencies ago that were still pushing data out on an e-commerce site that was essentially, cart information that is extremely valuable, but was being scooped up by multiple ad networks, and it was a big problem. There's no telling what damage might have been done or data that was inappropriately shared, but you really have to have good processes and standards to deal with tagging in particular. I'd say is the best way to address that.
I would agree with that 100%, Dominic. I can't tell me how many times I've started in on a new program, and when we examine the site, we see old media tags, like floodlight tags, firing that are from like a campaign from a media agency that's not even working for the vendor anymore. So it's important to kind of investigate those and keep track of which ones are most current. Well, excellent. I just want to thank you very much, Domenico, for the great discussion today. We are out of time, a little bit over. Sorry about that, everyone. But please be on the lookout for more best practices that we will be sharing with you through our Digital Innovation Web Clinic series. And also feel free to reach out to Dominic and I with any questions or comments you may have had about today's presentation. We are always looking to improve based on your feedback. Please let us know if you have any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. And with that, I hope that everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Take care.